Well, good afternoon, everyone. First, can I say that I have never, ever, ever been a Liberal Democrat. Let's get that out of the way. I have an allergic reaction to beards and sandals. But what a good couple of days we've had with regards to policy. Yesterday, people were talking about UKIP and the NHS, all in the same sentence. Quite remarkable and a success, and it shows how far we have come as a party. They're talking about our policy on housing yesterday as well, on energy today, on the BBC website no less. They are showing Roger's speech where we will have a sovereign wealth fund, where we will show that in 20 years' time, we were the ones who are putting our finances first. We're marching onto the turf of the other political parties, and just watch as they try and steal them. The Tories are giving a weak imitation of our policies on migration. The Liberal Democrats are stealing, thieving our policies on raising the income tax threshold. And frankly, if they keep on stealing our policies, I'm sort of thinking we should issue a European arrest warrant on them. But maybe not. We're putting together a common sense platform, and I've got to say that I couldn't have produced a platform without the help of all of our members, everyone here, and in particular, Patrick has been invaluable, absolutely invaluable with this. We have a volunteer who comes in called Mark Quinlan. He's been invaluable, and Andrew Moncrief has helped as well, so thank you, guys. We'll give them a round of applause. So we're putting together a common sense platform, but that platform, that common sense really isn't that common when you look at the political class. I was at a European event at Europe House earlier this year and made the point about migration and contributing into the pot before you get anything out of it. And this woman came over to me and we had a discussion, and I said, look, wouldn't it be good to have a system like Australia and New Zealand where you have to contribute before you get anything out of it? And she said, oh no, Tim, those systems work perfectly well for those countries because you see, they're both islands. There literally were no words to explain it. But that is a key policy of our welfare view. You pay in before you get out. Our NHS policy, yesterday, we said that if you come here, you have got to have private health insurance before you arrive. You know, it's the National Health Service, it's not the International Health Service. And it will save us billions. David Cameron says 20 million. Jeremy Hunt says 200 million. The problem is they're too busy arguing amongst themselves. The left hand doesn't know what the far left hand is doing. But we have an economic climate where we need to tackle welfare. It is one of the biggest chunks of public spending. And with risable growth, 0.6% growth, that's nothing to be proud of. But yet, the coalition were cheering it. Back to recovery, 0.6% growth is not recovery. Our devalued Chancellor has brought us a devalued economy. There is no growth, there are no signs of recovery. If anything, George Osborne should be known as Chancellor Zero. We have to tackle the deficit, because unless we get rid of the deficit, we can't start attacking the national debt. And if we allow them to grow, all of our public services are going to be in danger. And we have to realise that some tough choices will have to be made. And as we go into the general election, we will show that we are honest and straight talking, and that we will put forward policies that stick to our principles. And I can sum them up in 2 words: country first. You know, the politicians forget that they're meant to be the servants and not the masters. And with welfare, you have to talk about jobs. You have to talk about jobs. And as part of our EU membership, we are members of the European Union Job Mobility Portal. Isn't that nice? But we have 1 million young people unemployed. 1 million young people unemployed. That is a terrible, terrible statistic. They cannot talk about recovery when there are 1 million young people unemployed. And as part of this job mobility portal, we advertise 800,000 jobs across the European Union. 800,000. The EU pays for unemployed EU workers to get interviews and resettle if they cross borders to find work. So if you're going from London to Liverpool, what do you think you get? Nothing. But if you're crossing borders, you can get up to £1,000. And the Europhiles always say that we can go and live and work in other countries and vice versa. But we're advertising 800,000 jobs. Last time I checked, France was advertising 14,000. The flow is only going one way. Call me cynical, but I see this as a plan by the European Union to export their unemployed that have been created by the Eurozone crisis. They do it just to keep the euro in confidence for a few more months. How desperate are they? Why won't they just pack it in, break up the euro, and get people jobs on the continent? And closer to home, I would appreciate it more if our political class stopped talking down to our young people. How do they think it feels for them to continue to call our young people lazy, work shy? What do you think that will do for confidence and aspiration? So getting more people into work is the priority of our party. And the first step to do that, conclusively, is to leave the European Union. Getting more people into work will reduce the benefits bill, and it will be a sign of national renewal. And maybe other countries in the European Union will follow our lead and break out of their chains too. But that's not going to solve all of our problems. 13 years of a Labour government made welfare pay instead of work. And we still have a soaring benefits bill. We are, in principle, in favour of workfare. It worked in Wisconsin, but typically the coalition have made a mess of it. In their view, workfare is to subsidise private sector employment. You saw that farce with Poundland, where people were working for nothing for private business. That's not workfare. That's a disgrace. The real aim should be getting people into work or get them retrained. If they're on benefits, they have to put something back into the community. So we say we support workfare. Councils should be required to provide local community work or retraining for those who are unemployed. But if you are fit for work and you are offered a job, you damn well take the job. Our policy platform on welfare has always been to simplify the system. The political class love to make politics complicated. Our tax code is 17,000 pages long. Whoever came up with the idea of tax credits really needs to see a shrink because they are so complicated it beggars belief. So we're for simple politics. And so in principle, we support the idea of the universal credit, although we have problems with its implementation. That's one thing the coalition have got to get right. But, as I said at the start, you have to pay into the pot before you can claim out of it. And I don't know if any of you saw last week in, I'm sure what Patrick will agree, the world's greatest newspaper, the Daily Express, but there was an article. Latvian mother of 10 on £34,000 benefits wins fight for big house. Can you believe that? We were told this was meant to be under control. A Latvian single mother raking in £34,000 in benefits has had her house upgraded because her family grew from 3 to 10 children. I find it absolutely deplorable. Absolutely deplorable. And do you know what we're going to do? We will say at the next elections and the elections after that, that if you want to come to this country, you have got to financially support yourself and your dependents for 5 years. You wouldn't get that anywhere else, so why should you get it here? Somewhat related to that is the issue of child benefit. Now, it's not going to cure all of our problems, this, but I think we've got to say it. We should actually limit future child benefit to the first 2 children only. It's got to be done. It's got to be done. We will be creating more ideas and having more discussions, and we need your help on this. We need your ideas. On pensions, again, this is an area where it gets very complicated, and we also support simplification. And as such, if you're reforming pensions, one issue you've got to bear in mind is that people are making plans for their retirement. So every time a government gets in and starts meddling with a pension scheme, they're messing with people's life plans when they're actually hoping to go into their retirement years with a bit of relaxation, and they don't want the worry of turmoil hanging over them. And hasn't enough happened to pensions already? I think Gordon Brown should be hounded out of this country for raiding pensions when he did. I think the damage that quantitative easing has done to pension funds is an outrage. I think it's terrible. It is a tough and complicated field, and we want as simple pension as possible. And when we are out of the European Union, when we have our economy growing again, we will be in a position to give those who have contributed all of their lives a state pension we can be proud to say we're offering. So on a broader front, I need you. The policies and the platform come from the party. Please contact me, give me your ideas, and let's work together. But I tell you, I am likely to tear them to pieces. I would rather I did it than Andrew Neil or Jeremy Paxman. We have 30 seconds on the doors. We work harder than every other political party because we have to fight for every vote. So we've got to put our point across in 30 seconds. We have got to make sure that it fulfills our criteria of being basic common sense. Not left, not right, but what you could go into any shop, high street, and people would say, yeah, that's a good idea. I'll do my best to work with as many of you as I can, and as our membership grows, I think I might learn a thing or two about brevity. But we're not just a political party. We're a team. We campaign and slog it out beside each other. We leaflet together in the wind and rain, and we knock on doors in the midday sun. And we do this on welfare, on pensions, on energy, on immigration, because we only have one country. And I can give you my vow today that I will never, ever give up fighting for this great country. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Our final speaker for this afternoon's first section was a founder member of UKIP in 1993. He has been elected in 2 consecutive European elections to represent the London region, and he's also our party's chief whip. He's a prolific writer and has published numerous pamphlets and booklets on a wide-ranging variety of topics. He is our spokesman on immigration and home affairs, and he is a regular face and voice on radio and television. Please, conference, welcome to the platform, Gerard Batten, MEP.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this fantastic conference, which is going to be the best one ever, I think. Now, I did have half an hour, it's a bit shorter now, I think, to talk about UKIP's law and order policies, and we have to cover a lot of ground. Now, I'm going to say something about our domestic policy, but also about how the coalition government is further surrendering our traditional freedoms and safeguards to the European Union. I'll also be introducing two other speakers to tell you about their own personal experiences in both of these areas. One is a lady called Deborah Dark, if Deborah's in the audience, can she come up, please? And the other one is Suzanne Fernandez, who's there now. Now, in August, I submitted to our National Executive Committee a law and order policy review paper for their approval. Now, I'm not going to go into enormous detail, but I have a summary of those policy ideas which you can get from my stand, which is immediately outside of the hall. And it's called Restoring Law and Order, which is the title of the policy document. Now, law and order is in crisis. The vast majority of crime goes undetected and unpunished. Crimes like shoplifting, theft, burglary are regarded by the courts as so-called petty crimes, and the criminals have to have many convictions before they run the slightest risk of going to prison. Indeed, you know, such criminals need a very strong combination of stupidity, malevolence and perseverance ever to find themselves in a prison cell. They really have to work hard at it. Give them their due. Now, the police are not the problem. They have a very difficult job, a dangerous job, and most of them do it well. But they're the servants of the law, and it's the law that needs to be reformed. Now, first of all, we should redesignate the police service to a police force. Victims of crime cannot take their custom elsewhere if they're dissatisfied with the service they receive. The biggest immediate problem lies with the Crown Prosecution Service, or as many police officers call it, the Criminal Protection Service. Now, the CPS is infected with political correctness, and while at the same time being totally unfit for purpose. It's true they're underfunded and undermanned, but they're also incompetent. Now, their criterion for bringing a case to court is there sufficient evidence to gain a conviction, and is it in the public interest? Both of these are wrong. The criterion should be, has a crime been committed, and is there enough evidence against a suspect to put before a jury? It's for the jury and the court to decide, not for the CPS to worry about the impact on its statistics of a failed prosecution. We have to abolish the CPS and return the decision to prosecute to the police and their own prosecution lawyers. And when suspects are identified, they must be confident that they'll go to trial and, if found guilty, given an appropriate sentence. And as we've heard earlier, sentences must mean what they say. A year means a year, 2 years means 2 years, and etc., with longer sentences for repeat offenders. Now, I will make one concession to that, because I've spoken to prison officers who tell me they do need something of a carrot as well as a stick. And what they would like is to go back to the old system where there could be a small percentage of time off for good behaviour if the prisoners behave themselves in sentences, perhaps 10% of the total. So I defer to the professional opinion of the prison officers on that, and I think that's something that we could live with. Now, some prisoners are so dangerous that they should never be released. And that's something that previous Home Secretaries and the law has recognised. But no, the European Court of Justice, the European Court of Human Rights has stuck its nose in and told us that such criminals must have the right to review of their life sentences. So the most depraved killers can now take their cases off to the European Court and demand to be released into society. And of course, the European Court has also ruled that prisoners have to have the vote, and naturally they were supported in this by the Liberal Democrats. And despite all of Mr Cameron's huffing and puffing, he will be forced to concede. Now, what an Alice in Wonderland world we live in, where the lawbreakers can actually help choose the lawmakers. Let me summarise our law and order policy. Now, we must free up the police to do the job which they're there for, which is to prevent and detect crime. We must abolish the CPS, as I've said, and prosecute as many criminals as possible. And if convicted, the criminals must be certain that they will be punished in a meaningful manner. We need to build as many prisons as we need to do that, but not necessarily to spend billions. There are many non-dangerous, non-violent criminals who could be housed in redundant army camps. If it was good enough accommodation for our servicemen and women, then it's good enough for them. In my opinion, UKIP must oppose the privatisation of the police and the prison services. Policemen Police and prison officers must be officers of the Crown, answerable to the Crown, not somebody there to make a profit for private business and shareholders. Now, you've probably guessed that I'm not a softie on crime. But the law is there as much to safeguard the innocent as it is to convict and punish the guilty. And one thing that I am totally committed to is the preservation of our freedoms and protections established over centuries under the English Constitution and our common law. In 2010, I made a speech to the UKIP conference in which I described how the EU is creating its own system of criminal law, and I'm sorry to tell you that that project is still full steam ahead with the full cooperation of the coalition government and the Labour Party. Now, as I explained at the time, this project is being accomplished by the creation of various legal institutions and instruments, the most notorious of which is, of course, the European Arrest Warrant, which since 2004 has been responsible for a growing number of gross injustices. I've been involved in a number of these cases, as has my colleague William Dartmouth, MEP, and William went so far as to actually travel to Hungary to help secure the release of 2 British citizens who were being kept in totally inhuman prison conditions for something that would not even be an offence, a criminal offence in the UK. In 2010, the very first act of the Conservative MP Theresa May, when she became Home Secretary, was to sign up to the next stage of this process. She opted into something called the European Evidence Warrant, which, although it isn't finalised yet, will give foreign police services the right to instruct British police forces to gather evidence on British citizens. They won't have any choice about it. This directive is still being refined, as I say, but having opted in, they cannot now opt out. You will have also seen that under the Lisbon Treaty, we have the option to opt out of all the EU legislation on justice and home affairs in 2014. Now, this presents a difficulty for the coalition government, because how can they opt into or not opt out of this legislation while pretending that what they're doing is in our interests? And this is what they've come up with. There are about 135 different measures in question. Now, the government has announced, to a great fanfare, that it's opting out of 100 of these measures and only keeping the 35 of which we actually need for our own good. And they hope that nobody will actually read the legislation. Well, we did read the legislation. I and my researcher, Pavel, we've gone through it all and we've done an analysis on it, and I can tell you what it means. The 100 measures that they're trumpeting that they are removing are actually of no importance whatsoever. They consist of redundant and duplicated legislation and things that have already been superseded or replaced by the European Union. The 35 that remain are quite different. They include the European arrest warrant, the planned European investigation order, and they also include all the voluminous EU legislation on immigration, asylum and civil law. Now, not only will this law henceforward be subject to the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice, but not our own Parliament and courts. We are handing over control, the final control. Any appeals will go there and they will have the last say. And indeed, the Commission can actually take the British government to court over these matters if it feels it wants to. We have surrendered this ability for as long as we remain members of the European Union. Now, our freedoms and protections under the law are being destroyed. Only UKIP has warned that this is happening. Now, we stand for a strong and fair law and order policy at home, but we reject the EU's creation of its own system of criminal law. We want to punish our own criminals, but we want to protect our own people's freedoms, liberties and safeguards. Now, you will know very well that we can't do any of those things unless we leave the European Union. So I'd just like to check something with you for a moment. Do you want to leave the European Union? Yeah. I'm getting a bit hard of hearing in my old age. Was that a yes? Yeah. Great. Well, I'm now going to introduce the next speaker, who is a lady called Deborah Dark. Now, Deborah has had first-hand experience of what it actually means to be a victim of a European arrest warrant, and I use that term advisedly. She found herself whisked away from an ordinary life into a bureaucratic Kafkaesque nightmare of false imprisonment and inhuman treatment on the strength of a piece of paper. But let Deborah tell her own story in her own words.
In 1989, I was found not guilty for a drug offence. In 1990, the French prosecutor, without my knowledge, had appealed against that, and I was given a 6-year prison sentence. I walked around for 20 years without knowing that I'd been convicted. On the 23rd of April 2007, I was arrested at gunpoint at a Turkish airport. After a horrendous ordeal, I was released. I got back to the UK. I went to my local police station. I reported it. I reported what happened. And they checked on their computer. They said there are no warrants and no convictions. I suggested you go to the Foreign Office. I telephoned the Foreign Office. The Foreign Office got in touch with Turkey. They mentioned something about a red notice. And the Foreign Office told me that it must be mistaken identity. Later that year in March, I wanted to book a holiday to South Africa. I telephoned the Foreign Office. The Foreign Office again told me, I asked them if it would be safe for me to go. The Foreign Office again told me that it was mistaken identity. I went to South Africa, no problems. I came back. In September 2008, I went to visit my father, my daughter, and 9-month-old grandchildren. At the check-in on my return to the UK, I was arrested. I also forgot to tell you that I'd been in touch with soccer and various other organisations, and I had a letter from soccer with me. I was arrested. They told my daughter that she could not board the plane because she had the babies with her. I was taken to a room, and that's when the mystery finally came about. They told me that the French had appealed. I was given a 6-year sentence. I collapsed on the floor. I was so shocked. They had to sedate me. I just couldn't quite take it in. My daughter was left stranded at the airport. No milk, no nappies for the babies. My father had to come back to the airport and rescue her. I was given 10 minutes with them. And I remember sitting on the floor, all of us. My father was holding me, and we were all sobbing. And the Spanish customs said, "Why haven't the British done something about this? This is so wrong." I was taken to prison, a high security prison. Whilst I was there, it was horrendous. They were so violent there. I witnessed a woman in late-term pregnancy. She was attacked by a gang of Aker girls. They'd kicked her in the stomach. They'd stamped on her stomach. The guards shut the electronic gates and stood behind those gates, and while they literally just kicked her, I felt so ashamed because I couldn't help her. I was traumatised. Another incident, I saw a girl, her face smashed against a window ledge. Again, the guards did nothing. After a month, I was released from... The Spanish refused to extradite me. I was sent back to the UK. So I flew back to the UK. When I got to Gatwick, I was arrested again. And this time, I completely lost it. I was so angry, especially after they told me there was no warrants. I don't have a criminal record, and now they're arresting me. I screamed most of the night in the police station. I went to Westminster Magistrates Court the next morning, and I spent a night in Holloway. I got £5,000 bail, and I spent the next 7 months fighting extradition over here. The British refused to extradite me on the same grounds as the Spanish, but the European arrest warrant was still there. But no one in Europe knew how to undo an arrest warrant. Why put it in place if you don't know how to undo it? It was down to Fair Trials International, who have been amazing, to investigate it, and realised that the French had to withdraw it. Eventually, with media pressure and political interest, the French dropped it. But what I'd like to end this with, my name is Deborah Dark. I am innocent, and I refuse to accept that others are going through the same as me. And it's about time this was all brought to justice and stopped. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It took enormous courage for Deborah to come up here and stand with that, because she hasn't told you half of the horrendous things that happened to her because of this piece of paper and because of the doctrine of mutual recognition. And what that means is that every police force, every court system, every judicial system in Europe is deemed to be equal to every other one. So you can be carted off to Romania or Bulgaria, but don't worry, their policemen are as nice as ours, and it's just like the Old Bailey. I'd like to introduce the second speaker now, and we have gone over time, I'm afraid, because we started late. But this is a lady called Suzanne Fernandez, and she's very involved in the possibility of the rehabilitation of criminals and how this can be accomplished. She works as a youth mentor with gang members involved in knife crime, and she's going to tell us what she thinks about our crime policy and how crime can be tackled. Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you. I'll just explain a bit about my history and what I'm involved in. I work with gun and knife offenders in youth offending institutions and prisons. And my role is to work with them and try and get them back into the community after their release and help them get back into training and employment. What I have noticed over the years, the increase of gangs in this country and the lack of insensitivity of young youths joining gangs at 13, 14 and 15 years old. The increase of weapons on our streets with guns, where most 13-year-olds on estates have seen no problem getting involved with youth crime and being part of a gang as a way of life. I have been observing with the families who've been victims of crime, there's no justice. I had a situation 3 years ago in Croydon, a family called Dislandis. Their son, one son, Darren Dislandis, was murdered in a pub, and her other son, Junior, had 3 bullets lodged in his head. The person who killed her son, Saturday Hussein, he was an illegal immigrant in this country, and Theresa May refused to disclose information about his immigration status. That to me was appalling for the family. He should have been deported back to his country, and today, he is still serving a sentence in a prison, and he is having the time of his life, while the families are still struggling with the grief of losing their son. The mother, Lurleen, lost her husband due to lung cancer last year, and she contributes it to a broken heart. Now, my concerns are, when I deal with these young people in prison at Feltham and other institutions, it's become a holiday camp. It's almost become like childminding. They have so many incentives, and when they come out of prison, they're either tagged or on license, and within a very short space of time, they get back into offending. It does not work. It does not work. What I see is, if there were more policies to make crime tougher, that you had to work to earn privileges in prison. If you wanted to have visiting times, if you wanted to see your girlfriend or mother or family, you had to earn it. If you wanted to get privileges to have an access to a course, a university course or a college course, earn it. And I've just seen this population of young people looking at crime as almost like a badge. When they get back into the community, they look at their licensing, they look at their criminal record. It's become a badge of honour. I believe UKIP have some answers, and I believe it's a way forward to get tough on crime. We need to look at this European Court of Acts, the Human Rights Acts, how prisoners are getting rights to vote and having rights to protect their anonymity while victims are struggling. And I just believe UKIP has to come on the front line now. We need members to go back to their community, to prisons, and find out what's going on. We need to speak to young people. Why are they getting involved with crime? Why has crime become a way of life? If we look every week, we look at the news reports, there's an incident of a stabbing. I mean, it's appalling where they're getting their guns from. If you look at the borders, access to weapons coming into this country, it's an open door. And I feel we need to look at the regulations governing this. The real criminals behind these young youths are not being detected. So I just feel I've come here to share some of my experiences working on the front line. It's not getting better. I'm working with Trident. We look at an incident, and Trident's role is to get them convicted, but once that situation is over in court, it's a chaos, absolute chaos in the system. So I'm just here today to reinforce, I just want more people to be active with this area of gangs, with interventions, early interventions in school, educating teachers, parents about the effects of youth gun and knife violence as well. But also, primarily, I think we need to look at policies in this country regarding the criminal justice system, the Crown Prosecution Service. We're looking at now the privatisation of our probation service. What does that mean in real terms? So I just hope, again, we can see more activity, more young people standing and representing as well youth, and there is a better way. Thank you.